I'm Peter Loshak. We are continuing our off-season college football coverage right now with Steve from collegefootballwinning.com, a professional handicapper who only covers college football. We've been doing individual team previews with him all off-season long, and right now we're going to take a look at South Carolina. Steve, thanks for being back with us.
Thank you for having me back, Peter.
All right, Steve, before we get into a discussion of South Carolina, all you do is college football. You're a very successful handicapper. You have a great track record. Brag a little bit. Plug yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and plug collegefootballwinning.com.
Thank you, Peter. You already said at collegefootballwinning.com, all we do is college football 365 days a year. Our lifetime against the spread average is over 59%. Last year, for our paid-only picks, we were 58.82% against the spread over the course of the entire season. For bowl season last year, we were 67.22% against the spread. Our lifetime bowl season average is 67.8% against the spread. So I believe we're the only service that offers a 100% money-back guarantee if you do not have a profitable season for us. So over the course of an entire season, not just a particular game or a particular week, over an entire season. So you're going to do better than 52.38%, which is the break-even point in the bet 11 to win 10 betting world. So you're going to do better than 52.38%, or you're going to get your money back that you paid for our service if you opt for the money-back guarantee with us. We want to give out for SBR listeners a coupon code. If they put in SBR20, that's SBR20, they can get 20% off of any membership that we're offering.
All right, now let's talk about South Carolina. They are right now at Pinnacle plus 2104, 21-1 to win the BCS. That puts them tied with three other teams for seventh place. Last year, they had a very good year, 11-2 straight up, 8-5 against the spread. This year, you think they're going to be undervalued again?
They're very interesting. When we look at how a team's going to do against the spread over the course of a season, we generally look at, just in general, we start with three metrics. One is a predicted variation in their straight-up wins. The second one is their preseason ranking. And the third is looking for some sort of an extreme against the spread season immediately prior to the one that we're considering. So last year for South Carolina, in fact, the last couple of years, they've had back-to-back 11-win seasons straight up. That's a first in school history. So looking over the course of Steve Spurrier's tenure there at South Carolina as head coach, he only had 1 year where he actually had fewer straight-up wins than the prior season. And that 1 year was predictably unprofitable against the spread. In fact, that was tied for Steve Spurrier's South Carolina Gamecocks' worst against the spread year. Over the last 11 seasons, 2 out of 3 times that South Carolina has been ranked in the preseason, they've been unprofitable. And they are definitely ranked this year, 2013, in the preseason. The last 10 seasons, they have been profitable they've had 4 profitable against the spread seasons. 2 out of them were followed by unprofitable ones. The fourth one was this past year, so the jury's still out on that one, but so 2 out of 3 prior seasons that were profitable were followed by unprofitable ones. In 2012 was their second most profitable season in more than a decade against the spread. Some betting trends for South Carolina. Of 13 active head coaches with more than 80 against the spread victories, Steve Spurrier ranks 4th with all the teams, that's including all the teams that he's coached, winning greater than 55% of his games against the spread. Now, against the spread at South Carolina, it's not quite so good. He is just a fraction away from 54% against the spread. But Steve Spurrier is 0-6 against the spread versus the FCS while he is at South Carolina. And South Carolina plays FCS Coastal Carolina November 23rd. So you're going to want to look to fade them November 23rd. Steve Spurrier is 6-2 against the spread versus their hated in-state rival Clemson while he's at South Carolina. So that's something to note. He pretty much owns them against the spread. Unlike many SEC programs, South Carolina under Steve Spurrier has been a decent bet even when they're double-digit favorites. He has won 56.25% of those games, including going 5-2 against the spread last year as a double-digit favorite. But now you want to avoid South Carolina when they are getting at least 75% of the public betting, at home especially. They are 2-5. That's 28.57% against the spread over the last 10 years. In terms of reverse line movement, for South Carolina, reverse line movement has been no indicator whatsoever of the right side. Reverse line movement over the last 10 years, we've tracked it. They have been right. The side that has benefited from reverse line movement has been right exactly 50% of the time. So the only important exception to ignoring reverse line movement when it comes to South Carolina is when the betting volume is unusually high on a South Carolina game. Of their 8 highest betting reverse line movement games, the sharp side was correct 6 out of those 8 times, including being correct 3 out of the 4 bowl games South Carolina was in that experienced reverse line movement. Now, when we're looking at that BCS National Championship futures better, the possibility, we look at our 60% rule. It's an article that we wrote for SBR in the spring, and there are basically 5 predictive criteria for predicting a BCS national champion. The first one is, do they have an upperclassman quarterback? South Carolina meets that first criterion. They have 2 excellent upperclassman quarterbacks. Senior Connor Shaw finished 2012 in the top 5 for quarterback rating, and he rushed in his career at South Carolina so far. He's rushed for more than 1,000 yards. Even his backup, junior Dylan Thompson, he's good. He beat Clemson last year in Death Valley, stepping in for the injured Connor Shaw, threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then he came in game-winning drive against Michigan in a bowl game. The second predictive criterion is scoring defense. Last year, South Carolina had a scoring defense that was ranked 13th in 2012. So they meet that predictive criterion on paper, but here's the bombshell with all the Jadeveon Clowney talk that I'm going to give you now. South Carolina's problem in 2013 looks to be defense. Now, here are some facts. South Carolina lost 7 of their top 10 sack and tackles for loss leaders. They lost their 4 leading tacklers. They're gone. South Carolina only returns 41.8% of their tackles. That ranks 116th in the FBS and second to last in the SEC. What's worse when you look at the tackles that are gone is who is doing the tackling. So in terms of position, South Carolina of 2013, they have the youngest and most inexperienced linebacking core in the SEC. And despite South Carolina's linebacker light 4-2-5 base defensive scheme, so you only have 2 true linebackers there, linebackers should still be making the most tackles in that defense, like with most defenses. 9 out of the top 10 scoring defenses in 2012 had linebackers as their leading tacklers. That's very typical. South Carolina, when they have had a top 15 scoring defense, which has been the case the last 2 years, 3 out of their top 4 tacklers have been linebackers, including their top tackler those 2 years, for each of those 2 years. And they went 22-4 straight up in those 2 years. Now, their worst year scoring defense of the last more than 10 years, the last decade, that's when they did not have linebackers leading the charge when it comes to tackling. They were led by 3 out of 4 top tacklers as defensive backs. That scoring defense was ranked 43rd. That would not get the job done if you're going to win a BCS national championship. So our conclusion is the 2013 linebacker core is falling on 3 underclassmen with a total of 8 tackles combined. Now, if we were talking about this last year at this time, I would be telling you that South Carolina is going to have, for last year, they would have had 3 senior linebackers with a total combined tackles of 374. That is a huge difference, significant difference. The number 3 predictive criterion for a BCS national championship is being ranked in the preseason top 10. It looks like South Carolina will be in the top 10. We are waiting, as this is being taped, the end of this week. We're going to see the AP preseason poll, but according to the coaches poll, they're number 7, so we think South Carolina meets the 3rd predictive criterion. The 4th one is membership in the SEC. Of course, South Carolina plays in the SEC, so they meet that criterion. The fifth and final criterion is having a head coach at that school in the function of head coach for 2 to 4 years. Well, Steve Spurrier is entering his 9th season as head ball coach at South Carolina, so that fifth criterion is not met. In total, South Carolina meets 4 out of 5 predictive criteria for the 60% rule. So on paper, they look like a qualified candidate. And then you add to that fact that they're not playing Alabama, LSU, or Texas A&M in the regular season. And that 2014 futures bet looks like it's tempting. However, because of the grave concerns that we have for returning tackles, and in particular the inexperience at the linebacker position, we're not recommending a futures bet on South Carolina when it comes to the BCS. So when it comes to just conclusions about this upcoming year, 2013-2014 for South Carolina, Steve Spurrier wins games against the spread, even at times when he's a double-digit favorite. But fade these guys when they're facing the FCS, and they'll be playing at least one. They will be playing one FCS team this year, and fade them when they're greater than 3 touchdown favorites. We think that people, especially bettors, looking at South Carolina this year and their defense, they're going to have Jadeveon Clowney blindness. So we think they're going to be overvalued defensively. So even though South Carolina meets the 60% rule, we recommend against that BCS futures bet for 2014.
All right, well, that is about as comprehensive a preview of a college football team you could ever possibly want. South Carolina. Thanks so much, Steve from collegefootballwinning.com. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again very soon.